So I want to take you back a couple years. When I was 37, I was helping my family lead the family business, and I got put into a leadership position. Did not have any experience in leadership other than sitting at my dad's table, growing up and being able to learn from him and understand how he does business. But there I am, 37 years old and trying to lead for the first time, had direct reports, didn't really understand a lot about that. And I had the privilege of having a coach, Kevin West. How many of you guys know who Kevin West is? Incredible guy, gets a little bit of applause. So Kevin West was a coach at Mullet Cabinet and for the family business and is still there today. Today I have the privilege of sitting next to him at Rise Spaces. We're like office buddies. We're right next to each other. But Kevin's a mentor of mine and he was coaching me at the time. And I remember sitting in a workshop that he was doing. There was probably about 6 or 7 leaders from the family business sitting in the room. And Kevin is just taking us through a book and he's teaching us some principles. And at one point he was talking to us about upending the pyramid. And since then I've learned from John Stalwart what that means of upending the pyramid, but it was the first time I'd ever heard that concept. And he said, you need to flip the pyramid. And I'm like, Kevin, I don't know what that is. And so I just asked the question. He said, well, what happens is a lot of times when somebody's leading, they have a lot of work that they're doing and they expect everybody else to be able to help the leader with the work. So everybody, all the direct reports are helping the leader get their work done. And he said you got to flip that upside down and you actually need to come at it from a different angle. And as the leader, you need to be able to help the people, your direct reports, get the work done. And I'm sitting there thinking about that and thinking about what that looks like. And I was thinking about my workload at the time. And we were going through a lot of transition in the business. And I was meeting on a daily basis. We were putting a plan together for a big change that we were making. And it just overwhelmed me to think about that I need to be there and go help my people. So I threw my hand up again and I said, Kevin, what does that look like? And he said, oh, you need to bump your people. I'm like, I don't know what that is. Kevin, what is bump your people? He said, oh, I bump my people every morning. I'm like, what? Yeah, I bump my people. He said, every morning when I get into the office, I make my rounds through each person's office and I bump into them. Okay. So he keeps going. I throw my hand up again. What do you talk to him about? He says, well, I'm there to try and figure out whether or not they showed up or not. I'm like, what? What do you mean if they showed up? He's like, yeah, because sometimes people come to work, but they're not there. Oh, okay. I was starting to get it. And so I'm sitting there thinking about it, and again, it comes back to me, my workload, and I'm working, 50 plus hours. It's all I'm thinking about. And I thought about what it would look like to walk into my people's office the next morning and bump into them. And then I thought about, if I stop in at so-and-so's office, I know the first thing he's going to ask me, and he's going to say, this, and this is happening, and then I'm not going to be able to get any of my work done. I'm going to have to go help him, and I know that's going to take an hour or two. And honestly, that was a pivotal point in my leadership. In that moment, I actually took my pen and I set it down on the table. I sat back, and Kevin's still teaching, and there's other people in the class, and I thought, you know what? If that's what leadership is, I'm done. I can't do it. I'm already up to here. I'm overwhelmed. I just don't think this is for me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell my family that I'm not cut out for this. And I'm kind of thankful that it was like an hour-long session, because somewhere in the next 10 to 15 minutes, as I was kind of throwing a little bit of I'd call it a hissy fit, a thought occurred to me. And all of a sudden I realized, I don't have to start. I don't have to be great to start. I just have to start to be great. And at some point, I reached back down and I picked that pen up. And that day was a pivotal point for me, because after that, every time Kevin came in the office, I was pestering him. And I was saying, what about this? How do I do that? What do I change? And I began to revamp everything that I did in regards to helping my people. And it actually occurred to me that if I improve in what I'm doing and I get better, and maybe I get 10% improvement or 20% improvement, that's great. But what happens if I take every one of my direct reports and I help them to do their best work? And then you start taking however many direct reports you have, and you get them to increase 10, 20, 30%, and it's a completely different multiplier. That really changed how I worked. And that was the first time that I started to really understand what leadership looked like. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give you some of the things that I understand about people. So I've been running my own business now for about 10 years, and I didn't even discover how much I enjoyed coaching till about 3 years ago. And I was doing a lot of sales training, helping people to grow companies, do things like that. And I discovered, you know what I really like to do is I like to sit and listen to people. I like to listen to their stories, understand them, and then be able to help them sort through all the different things that they're facing. So those are some of the things I want to share with you today is how do you help your people to grow? How do you help them to expand? How do you help understand them more than they understand themselves? How can you really make a difference in their lives? There's a book by Kevin Lehman. I don't know if you've read it before, but it's called The Way of the Shepherd. If this is not a book on your library or one that you've read, I would highly encourage you to get this. Kevin Lehman, it's not like our layman, it's Leman, The Way of the Shepherd. But his first principle, he lays out 7 different principles to be able to help you to help lead your people. Number 1 is understanding your people. And being able to understand each one of your direct reports, the people around you, is the key to be able to help them to grow. I wanted to start out by showing you just a simple method that I use to be able to have better conversations when I'm coaching or I'm listening to somebody. And then we're going to jump into the matrix that I have there. But this is just the 5 whys. How many of you guys have heard of that principle before, the 5 whys? Right? This is common. It comes from the Toyota manufacturing system, is used a lot in lean. But it's basically just the principle of asking why. So what happens is as you're talking to somebody and they share something, instead of jumping in and solving the problem, you're just going to ask the simple question of why. So this was a conversation that I had recently with a salesperson. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through what the whys look like. Now, we say 5. Sometimes that takes a lot longer. Sometimes if you ask why 3 times, that works. And really, repeat and ask is the easiest way to do it. So you just repeat back what they said, and then you ask why. So the person was telling me sales were down for the month, and the leads slowed down, and the phone stopped ringing. So all I did was said, oh, leads slowed down. Why is that? And then they said, well, the leads stop, I'm not sure, but I don't really know what to do when the leads stop. I'm not sure how to generate new leads. So, okay. Why do you not know how to generate new leads? Why do you not know what to do when the leads stop? He says, well, I lack a clear lead generation strategy. I don't have a way to be able to go make the phone ring. Okay. Why do you think that is? Well, I'm not sure where to focus my efforts. I know there's so many different things that I could do, but I'm not quite sure which one is the best way. I'm not sure which is the best one for me. Okay, why is that? Well, I don't want to waste my efforts. You know, my boss put me in this spot to be able to generate leads, and I want to do what's best there. Well, why is that? And then he said, well, I hesitate to ask for help. I don't want to be a burden. I know my boss is busy. I know they have a lot going on, so I'm just not quite sure what to do. Well, why is that? Well, a lot of it has to do with I know there's an expectation on me, and I don't like feeling incapable. So asking for help is really difficult for me. That simple conversation of why led us to a whole different point of view, right? Because there's a lot of different layers there of what needs to be helped. And instead of me saying, hey, here's what's missing, here's what you need to change, here's what you need to fix, that person was able to speak it out loud, think through what was going on, and we both had a good picture of what was happening. Now, on your page, what I did is I created a matrix of 9 different things that I watch for when I'm having good coaching conversations. And we're going to kind of go through here. And what I did is I just created a simple sheet that helps me to be able to think about a team. And at the top, what you can do is you can write in your team members, the people that are direct reports, write their name at the top, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate each one of them. If you look at the bottom of your sheet, there's a plus, a minus, and a question mark. A plus is that it's an asset. Each one of these, as we describe them, it's either going to be an asset or a liability, or you're not sure. Right? Not sure means you're going to have to go find out. Now, don't be afraid to put the question mark in there. So as you're evaluating each one, more than likely you'll have a lot of question marks if you've not done this before or evaluated your team this way. But all we're trying to do is get an understanding of who they are, what makes them tick, and where can you help them. So number one, winning mindset. This is the opportunity to believe that they can win. Them personally, can they win? There's a lot of times that we're doing well, and then in the morning you're getting ready, you're leaning down, putting your socks on, you're thinking, boy, things are going well right now. Whatever that next thought is what's going to happen throughout that day. Does a person that is succeeding and having things go well, do they have the ability to keep their foot on the gas? Or are they going to say, boy, I better be careful. Things have been going so well. If I don't watch it, things are going to derail here pretty quickly. And all of a sudden they begin to just take their foot off the gas a little because it feels a little bit risky, a little dangerous. Having a winning mindset is the ability to keep your foot on the gas when you're having success. And if you've ever ran into somebody that has the opposite of that almost derails or self-sabotages, they've got some thinking in there, some beliefs that they're not able to succeed, they're not capable of succeeding. In fact, they might not even deserve to succeed. I worked with a salesperson, this was quite a few years ago, and he kept getting up to a certain level in his business and then couldn't seem to get past it. Every time he'd have a couple of wins, it would be like after the next couple months, it would just taper off. And when we started digging into what was going on, he started talking about his dad and how much his dad had earned and what kind of car his dad drove. And he didn't feel like he deserved to be able to do something greater or ahead of what his dad did. I had a hard time understanding that at first, and then I thought about it. You know, my dad, in my eyes, is one of the most successful people I've ever met. Growing up inside the family business, I wish I could count how many of his employees at some point walked up to me and said, you know, I really like working for your dad, and this is the best place I've ever worked. Boy, that's a high standard. And I always felt like, well, you look up to your dad and you think, well, I can't do what he does. And I always had a hard time, well, what if I'm more successful than he is? And I had a lot going on. And it's weird, but sometimes the number one fear that we have is not fear of failure. It's actually fear of success. I meet salespeople all the time that their ability to keep their foot on the gas, to be able to put themselves in vulnerable situations, to be able to go into new opportunities, and to continuously do it over and over again, no matter the risk of failure, is pretty incredible. So that's winning mindset. So I want you to go through and I want you to evaluate each one of your team and think about, do they have a winning mindset? Put a plus or a minus there or a question mark. Next is goal-oriented. This is, do they have a direction in life? Too many people wake up every day and they do a rinse and repeat, which means that their goal is to get through the day and they're not motivated past anything else. A lot of what we do is to be able just to help them, hey, what are your goals? What are the things that you're working toward? What's some different things in your family that you'd like to be able to change? Are they goal-oriented? Do they have a plan? And here's something that a lot of bosses don't really understand. People don't come to work for the same reasons that you do. When you own the company or you're running a division, the ownership that you take is completely different than what your employees or your team members are feeling. They're not motivated by the same things. And they're not going to work just because they want to be able to grow the company or be able to help the customers. And you have to help them identify what are the things that bring them to work. What's important to them? What are they working towards? Have they ever written any of those down? At the end of this, I'm going to invite you to our goal setting series. We do one every December. And we have it available. There's 3 different series that we do. We do a 3-hour session of goal setting where we help you write out your goals and think about all the different areas of your life. There's 8 different categories. And then we do a vision board to be able to help tie those goals to something that's visible, something that you can look at it on a daily basis. And then lastly, help you focus on leading indicators. We call it a cookbook. But we have that coming up in December. It's a 3-session series that we'd love to invite you to. It's $150 per person. You can sign up at the table out front. But you're just thinking, okay, so evaluate your team. Are they goal-oriented? Does that person have something that they're working towards? So next is system builder, right? An interesting thing about successful people is they're actually fairly boring when it comes to how they do things. I talked about rinse and repeat, that there's some people that just wake up and they're just trying to make it to the end of the day. This is different than that. This is the ability to build a system that can be repeated, it's effective, it's efficient, and that you don't get creative and you do the same thing over and over again because you can expect the different results. And somebody's ability to build a system that is repeatable, that can give them success, is one of the attributes that we're looking for in a highly motivated employee to be able to help them grow. Because there's many people that you meet that if they could just do the same thing over and over again, their success would increase. So do they have the ability to build systems? Next is lifelong learner. I'm curious, just as a show of raise of hands, and the fact that you're here today says a lot, but would you consider yourself a lifelong learner? You know, I have a great example in my Uncle Dennis. He retired from being a pastor for many years, and I was sitting with him at a church service, and I was thinking, oh, he's retired now, right? But sure enough, halfway through the sermon, he reached into his pocket where he always keeps an index card, and he pulls the index card, and there he is making notes. And it occurred to me, my uncle is a lifetime learner, right? He's just constantly looking at how do I grow, how do I improve? And if your people are not reading, if they're not learning, if they're not doing things different, they're going to have a hard time growing, right? And if you've ever studied growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? Fixed says that I already know everything I need to know. I can't learn anything new. That's one of the most difficult things to get out of. And if you're raising children, it's important that you're able to help them to get to that growth mindset, that they don't believe that they're either smart or dumb, that they can understand that every situation I come into, there's something new to be learned. So I had the privilege, this is several years back, when John Maxwell was coming in the area quite a bit, and I got to be in the room in a very small crowd with John Maxwell, mostly because I was the volunteer that was there, but I got to be included. And John Maxwell made a comment that I'll never forget. He said, if I have to choose leading versus learning, I'll choose learning 10-1 over leading. I thought, now, John Maxwell is the leadership guru, right? He's probably just saying that because, that's what he should say. But they had a question and answer period afterwards where you could go up and ask a question, and nobody was going up. And I'm like, hey, here's my chance. I went up, I said, John, I appreciate the 10-1, but that seems really extreme. Like 10-1 is a lot. And he said, well, I've learned over time that when my people bring me a problem, if I don't have something new to share with them, they're going to stop bringing me problems. That's why he picks learning over leading 10-1. And it's the same thing is true of your people, right? If they're not willing to learn, if they're not growing, then they can't face new situations. They're going to use the same hammer on the same screw over and over again and not realize, oh, there's something different here. And this reminds me of another story. My grandpa Jake, I'm not sure what we were talking about one time, but he actually said that when they first started building cabinets and installing them, they were using slotted screws, right? They were using the straight screws. And I don't know if you've ever used like a straight screw. And I don't know if they were probably using like screwdrivers, and then maybe they had a drill that was plugged in, I don't know. But he said he remembers the first time that the salesperson came to the shop and had a Phillips head screw. And he thought, now how dumb? What would we need with that? Can you imagine? I don't know if you've used a screwdriver lately or a screw gun, but now we've moved on from the square head, now we're on the star bit, and like it's a completely different game. But that's what happens when you have a fixed mindset. If you're not open to new ideas, there you're going to be using a slotted screw when there's so much better available. So rate your people on whether or not they're a lifelong learner. Next is emotionally intelligent. This is probably my favorite topic on this entire chart. How many of you guys have heard of EQ or emotional intelligence? Okay, so I would say less than half. This is something I want you to make a note of. This is something you have to know. As a leader, to be able to help your people, you have to understand emotional intelligence. So they used to say that IQ, intellectual quotient, was the most important thing in order to be able to tell if somebody's going to be successful in their job. Well, today they say that EQ, your emotional quotient, your emotional intelligence, is the number one factor on whether or not you're successful in a job. So EQ, to sum it up, is your ability to withstand ups and downs in order to be able to keep doing what you need to do every day. So if you think about this week, right, this is Thursday, you've had 3 days at work, more than likely there's been some kind of event that has either happened personally, in your family, at home, or something that has happened at work that has some form of emotional situation going on, some kind of emotion tied to it. You were in a meeting where something was emotional, you had a customer that was emotional, you had something that happened. Your ability to know what's happening on the inside of you, how that impacts you, and then how you regulate accordingly. So in other words, when something emotional hits you, are you able to regulate and come back to normal and continue to excel at your job? That's emotional quotient. And then it's also the ability to know what's happening with other people. What's happening emotionally with everybody else that's happening there, and can you regulate that as well? EQ is one of the number one things. Now, 5 years ago, we started using a DISC assessment that included emotional quotient. And I was unfamiliar with it at the time. I take the test, and it scores you on 5 different areas from 0 to 100, right? And, I'm thinking, I can score on this. I'm going to get some good scores. And I get my results back, and nothing was even close to, well, the average in America is somewhere between 70 and 76. Those are good scores. I would have gotten an F, right? My scores were really, really bad. And a radar went off in my head, and I realized, oh my goodness, I'm a very emotional person. When something happens to me or an emotion comes in, I'm actually not able to regulate, and it impacts a lot of the things that I do. In fact, I recognized that my family was that way too. So I went on a tear. I kind of made it this is what my focus is, to become emotionally intellectual. And I started working on those things. I started reading books. I started studying about it. I started paying attention. I started journaling, right? All of those things to be able to make so that when something emotional happens, I can handle it. Now think about your people. You know already which ones in this list have a minus. The ones when something happens at home, even if it's something good and they got vacation coming up, or it's a holiday weekend or whatever it is, they're already not performing at their highest level because they have a hard time being able to digest emotion, process it, and keep moving, right? So understanding emotional intelligence is one of the most important things we can do, and understanding where our people are so that we can help them is what's important here. No need for approval. If I'm being honest here, most of these, I always feel like I start at about a 0 and then I learn about them. I work really hard on them. I get better at them, and I still have a lot of room for improvement. No need for approval is one of my lowest attributes, right? I'm just telling on myself here. So when you think about your need for approval, your desire to be liked, when you're in a situation, do I want somebody to like me? Right? Take, for example, I'm standing up here, I'm talking to you, I'm sharing things. My ability to share things that step on your toes has a lot to do with my ability to seek approval. If I want your approval, I'm probably not going to be mean to you. Right? I'm not going to tell you hard things. Your people are the same way. If their biggest desire is just to get that other person to like them, they're probably going to have a hard time saying no when a situation needs to be said no. They're going to have a hard time actually sharing their opinion and being able to say what's true. They'll have a hard time standing up for themselves when they have a high need for approval. Helping identify that in your people is important so that you can help them work through. Hey, you know what? Maybe the approval rating is not the most important thing here. Maybe we're actually hurting ourselves because all we care about is whether or not they like us. So rate them on need for approval and their ability to stand alone. Next is positive outlook. And this is different than the winning mindset. This has a lot to do with, do we believe that we can win? And this has to do with their view of the company and whether or not it's a good fit. If you think about the people that work at your company, they're probably not going to be there forever. I say that, and at Mullet Cabinet, there's a guy named Dwayne D. Miller. He actually started before I was born. He's still there, right? He's been there an incredibly long time. He's getting close to 50 years. That's not normal, right? Typically, the only person that stays at a company that long is the owner. So the truth is that people are going to come and go. They're going to be with you for a certain amount of time. What you're looking for is, does the vision and the mission of the company line up with that person's outlook? Do they have the same direction? And as long as they're going in the same direction, that's important. But if they're not, that's probably not somebody that you want there long term. And you want to be able to help them work it out. And that's okay, right? Not every company is aligned with the people that are there. But understanding what their outlook is makes a big difference. And I hate to use this phrase, but Debbie Downer is one that I think about, right? Somebody that doesn't line up with everything is the person that's always muttering or mumbling, right? They're the person that leaves the meeting and then is complaining to somebody as they go down the hallway. Understanding what's going on inside that person and helping them with their positive outlook is a key performer. Next is no fear of failure, and I talked about the opposite of this in the winning mindset. Fear of failure is something that keeps us from risking. And in order to be successful, to be able to try new things, we have to be able to take our foot off of first base so that we can get to second. And a lot of times we think about failure as personal. If I fail in this, it's going to be personal and I'm going to take a hit. I like to think about it as it hits me right in my stomach, right? It's that one hurt. And if somebody ties personal failure or failure to themselves, they're simply not going to take risk. It's too risky, it's too hard. So being able to help them to understand, no, failure's good. We have to be able to fail. If we're not comfortable failing, we're not going to be able to move on. Number 9 is humble attitude. And this is just the ability to be able to put others first. There's a lot of people that I work with that are okay with being the center of attention, or they're okay with being out front. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is a matter of if I'm willing to sacrifice for other people. Am I willing to do what's difficult and to be in the background? So I'm curious, I'm going to put this out to the crowd a little bit. What are some different ways that you can use this sheet? I'm guessing that as you were going through this, you're thinking lots of different things. What are some different things that you can do with this sheet to be able to help you grow your team? Yeah, go for it. So as you go down through, is it because of the question marks or because of, yeah, so anywhere that you have a question mark, this should help you to be able to have good conversations. You can actually grab a blank sheet of this and be able to go down through with one of your team members. There's some that will work through this really well. Good. What else? How else can you help use this?
I can have team members rank themselves to identify where they want to focus on.
Good. And that is one of the number one ways that we can coach, because a lot of times, depending on who the person is, they're either going to score really high or really low, and they're either way too optimistic and they gloss over all the problems, or they do the opposite and they don't give themselves any credit. So what I really like to do is have the leader fill one out, have the participant fill one out, and then you sit down and compare, right? And that way you're able to say, well, you had this as a liability. I see this as an asset for you. This is what's happening. Or they score it as a asset, and you say, well, here's why I would consider this a liability, and it opens up really good conversations. Good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Have you used this as a 360 tool?
Oh,
You know what I mean?
to be able to help other people to assess a leader or to be able to assess somebody? Yeah, good example, Reinhardt, there is be able to pass this around inside your team and be able to help you evaluate somebody. Good. Anyone else? So one of the hardest things about coaching, right, is being willing to get in the trenches and do it. If you think about how difficult it is to actually spend 15 to 30 minutes with a team member on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, most leaders that I talk to, this is one of the most difficult things that happens, is being able to just carve out the time. I want you to think, I just want you to picture in your world, what would happen if 15 minutes a week, you were able to either sit in your employee's office or they come into yours, or you're able to grab a quiet space somewhere, and without an agenda from your point of view, you were able to simply show up and find out what's going on in their world. To be able to ask them what's happening in their week. To be able to understand their time. What would they do with that amount of time? How would that change their world? Being a coach to your people is probably the most important thing that we can do. So that's everything I have for today, for this session. We're going to be back in here at 11, I think it is. So thank you.